Darkwood is a genuinely scary game. Not the jump scare kind of scary, but the atmospheric kind of scary. The kind of scary where you want to run and hide, but you know you can't. The kind of scary when it's only over after you defeat it. I had seen gameplay of Darkwood, and others had told me what it's about, but I feel it's one of those games where you have to play it to experience it properly. With that in mind, I'll still try my best to give it a fair review. Darkwood is a top-down horror game. Initially, I thought this was a bit weird of a mix, but over time, I started to realize it's actually a perfect combination. Some of the game's most important features, like the line of sight and lighting, would be much harder to make work well in a 3D setting. And although it may be easier in 2D, I feel the effort they put into the shadows, the lighting, and the graphics in general for this game are perfect. I've never played a game which is simultaneously horrible and both beautiful to look at. Every piece of the environment is beautifully put together, and you can tell this is a passion project. There's so much effort, but I feel it's exemplified when you look at the character portraits. Through the game you meet a variety of different characters. Most of them, aren't too friendly based on the game, but it's always a treat to just look at how horribly ugly yet detailed they are. And sure, there's a lot of beautiful games out there, but a game which was crowdfunded with $57,000 went a long way with what it had. And now on Steam it has over 150,000 sales. It's really impressive. It's really just one of those amazing to hear successful indie game stories which we don't get enough of these days. The gameplay is smooth and functional, but it's also meant to be a constant challenge, which I feel the game does quite well. At the start, you really don't have much, and it's mostly just about exploring and learning how the game works. You're definitely going to die a lot at the start, but that's kind of the intention. Every time you load the game, it reminds you that the game won't hold your hand, and it's not easy. And this isn't one of those games where it's so hardcore, I'll die all the time, and it's so fun. Dying in this game sucks, but it's not punishing. If you play on the normal mode, you do just drop some gear, but you can get it back. But it's a very fair, yet still challenging way. People that want a harder experience can play on the one life mode. I'm not kind of into that, but it's not bad. The core gameplay revolves around exploring your environment, crafting to better arm yourself, heal yourself, and improve the safe house that you have. Collecting these red mushrooms which you can use to level yourself up. I found that a really cool level up system. And you're also always loosely following the storyline of the game, which it's never in your face, but it's always present. It influences what you do and why you do it. You could complete the game in 10 hours or 30 hours depending on how many of the side quests you want to do. They're not usually that rewarding, but they're always interesting to learn something and better kind of immerse yourself in the forest. The combat system in the game is very straightforward, and that's what I like in a horror game. Most of the time you will be using melee. You'll go from using just a stick to a fire axe. There are also always firearms in the game, but I pretty much completed the game without needing them at all. It does make it a lot easier. If you do spend a lot of time exploring, you will get the components you need to make it. Any melee weapon or gun you find in the game you can make yourself. If you get the proper components and you upgrade your workbench, you can make a fire axe, a 2x4 with nails, a shotgun, which I really like. I don't like when games have rare items you can only find. In a survival horror game like this, it's nice to be able to choose your weapon of choice. I pretty much just kept using 2x4s with nails and upgrading them because they're very cost effective. But later in the game, I did find myself needing the fire axe for the extra damage. The enemies in the game are simple yet still creative. You'll come across mutated animals, mutated people, or they've gone insane, or weirdly mutated parts of the forest itself, whether that be fungi people or just hostile trees. Fighting any of them is usually pretty difficult until you get used to their patterns. You can't run from any of them really, they are faster, but you can break line of sight. It's usually about waiting for them to strike, dodging and hitting. At the start, it feels nearly impossible, but by the end you get really used to it, and sometimes you won't even take a hit. but the enemies do stay pretty lethal for the whole game. They always will take a fair bit of your health even after getting health upgrades. And when it turns to nighttime, there's less fighting and more running and hiding. During the night, if you're out at a certain time, you will just die by some dark force. It's pretty vague, but pretty evil. So then the other kind of half of the game comes where you have to go to your safe house, you have to fortify it, have your lights on, hide, make sure the generator is fueled. And it makes for some really tense moments. You get a lot of random events which occur. Sometimes you'll get attacked, sometimes you won't, sometimes you'll just hear weird noises. And it's just a very unique and fun experience you don't really have with most other games. The fear and discomfort in the unsurety of what exactly is happening is an experience I've never had with another game. The amount of overwhelming atmosphere that you get immersed in Darkwood, especially at night, has yet to be matched. You never know if you're just going to be sitting there for a few minutes or if some unsightly beast is just going to smash through your barricades. But after a while, the music starts to change and it turns red outside, and you get that amazing sense of relief as day comes and you can actually go outside, and it's actually a nice change to fight the beasts during the day because they're so much less intimidating. Although the various monsters in the game are ugly and evil and scary to a degree, most of the time that I got scared in this game was from sound. The sound in this game is great, whether it's the music, which is a very just well put together soundtrack which fits the game's atmosphere, or it was from simple sound effects. You'll find yourself exploring the forest and it's quiet and you actually feel some genuine sense of ease. Then suddenly you step on a trap, whether it's a bear trap or poisonous mushrooms, and during those times I've nearly jumped out of my chair. This game does a great job at violating your sense of safety and security in such subtle ways. You spend so much time worrying about a big monster which is going to attack you. As you progress in the game, the environment itself becomes more and more of a threat. There's these glowing red lights which will erode your sanity, trees which will latch onto you and poison you, swamps will hide monsters which will jump out at you. It goes from you just fighting monsters to you fighting the forest itself. And that ties in well to the game's story. It starts vague and it even ends vague, and it's what you do in the middle to figure out what's happening. You start off kidnapped with no real understanding of what's happened or why you're in the forest, and you start to meet other strange individuals who actually live in the forest. They understand it more, and some are willing to help you, some for their own gain and others because they feel so lost in the forest they're just trying to find someone to be nice to. And most of the people that you meet in the forest, they were there before it went so evil in a way. It grew around them and trapped them inside, and they've just kind of learned to live with it. You come across a lot of notes of people trying to survive and trying to get out, and they're going crazy and they're starving, and it shows that the only ones that survive the forest were the ones to accept it and maybe embrace it in some way. Someone like the Wolfman embraced it to have no limitations on to what he could do. He would be the ruler of his own domain. But then you find countless inhabitants of a village and they're just trying to survive and trying to live a regular life amidst all the insanity and starvation and plague which is occurring. And I guess in your own way you embrace the forest by using these weird red mushrooms to empower yourself. And what I like about this level up system is that with each tier that you rank up, you do have to accept some kind of negative, which I kind of interpret as, although you can live with the forest, it is some kind of malevolent force which, although you don't understand, you can tell it's not good given all these monsters and disease which it gives birth to. So before I talk about the ending, I want to give my conclusion on the game. I definitely recommend this game completely. I don't know of many other games which deserve your $15 US. I'm finding it difficult to bring up any real criticisms of the game. It achieves what it sets out to do, make a very engaging, interesting, and atmospheric top-down horror game. Sometimes it does get a bit boring with repetition, having to backtrack a lot to do a mission or pick up your gear. but often that can be attributed to the player's fault if you die a lot, and the game is generally pretty fair. You can really play at your own pace. And although it does take a while to go and collect an item and run back to your base and store it, I still think it's pretty straightforward, even for a game where positions on the map are randomly generated. The maps are usually the same, but areas won't be in the same place like they were in your previous playthrough. Even given that, it's still pretty simple to traverse the game and its geography. One other minor criticism is the difficulty balance. The middle of the game is actually more difficult than the ending in my opinion. I found the locations before the swamp more difficult than the swamp itself, although the swamp does have more enemies, which at the start are confusing and you might die a few times because you're not sure how they work. But soon enough at that point it does get pretty simple. You will have enough gear that you're never really on the back foot, except at nighttime of course. You can just fight and kill pretty much all the enemies you come across, which is kind of the opposite from the start, which in some ways does make sense, but I would have preferred a challenge of the whole time. On the other hand, I guess that's what the difficulty modes which give you 1 or 4 lives are for, but yet again I don't think I'm good enough to do those. So it's not really a real criticism, just an opinion. It does get fairly easier over time. So that's it for the conclusion. Let's start talking about the ending. If you don't want to hear it, I recommend leaving now. Thanks for watching if you're new. Recommend subscribing. Have a nice day. So the ending of this game, still pretty vague, but it gives some context which will answer some questions you have. So let's get into full spoilers. There's 2 endings and 1 optional path which you can get through the radio tower. I unfortunately couldn't get it because you only have 1 chance in your save in your playthrough. You die once during the radio tower dream sequence and that's it. So unfortunately I kind of miss out on the extra info you might get from that. But in both endings you still get a decent amount of information to use. So the first ending, which most people will get, is the one where you just fall asleep in your apartment. You leave a forest, it's all good, and you fall asleep, and that's it. Then there's the other ending, which I was aware of, but I wasn't sure how to get it without a guide, because it does take a fair few steps, and messing any of them up will just result in you getting the first ending. So you'll step into your apartment, and you can go straight to bed, straight to your room, or you can take a look around. There's a lot you can actually explore. And I think for most people they would be very suspicious that, oh, it's over, I just go to sleep. You've been through such a paranormal and eldritch ordeal that it just doesn't make sense to end it there. In the apartment basement you'll find some red mushrooms, like from the forest you'll find a mysterious radio, you'll find a moving shadow. And then you'll figure that it's not normal, this isn't what the regular life is like, so then you continue to explore the apartment. One of your neighbours, you go in and check their room and there's this fetus. And then you go to your room and you can start taking it apart and remove the floorboards and you discover it's all tree roots. And then there's a hole underneath your bed which you explore, and then you discover another tree again, a massive one which has thousands of bodies laying on it, and you realise that this is another ruse. You're still within the Darkwood, and then you proceed to find someone you vaguely know, which is probably one of the people that you went into the forest with as a group. Likely you, him, and the doctor. And you take his flamethrower and then you actually kill the real tree. All you did was move from one part of the forest to another, and it's trying to trick you into thinking it's over and for you to fall asleep because you have all these bodies trying to sleep on the forest and it's like feeding off of them. And most people will miss out on this dark twist. Most people won't find this ending, this fire ending at the end. Most will get the simple end and they won't get closure, and you only get closure if you look for it. Pretty much your whole existence in the forest has been a dream state. Even you escaping has kind of been allowed in a way. The forest is confident that you'll still give in at the end. Your character is so tired and they just want to give up, or the forest wants them to give up. And you only really end it by sacrificing yourself to actually destroy the forest and open it up for everyone else. And most inhabitants in the forest die, only a few actually hide and make it out. Even though it's kind of a good ending of the two, you still have to have a lot of people die to rid the world of this forest. The story was vague but succinct, and I don't think I'll ever really forget playing this game. It was so engaging and interesting and fun that I had a great time playing it, even though if it wasn't that long, it didn't have to be a long game to be good. So that's the end of this review. If you're new to the channel, I recommend subscribing to see when new reviews are out. Don't forget to click the bell. Like if you enjoyed, dislike if you didn't. Comment what you thought if you're going to get this game, if you've played this game. You can keep in touch with me on Twitter and Discord, links down below. I'm Al, and as always, thanks for watching.